I actually posted this headline recently about Rory McIlroy and his Whoop data showing that he's lowering his heart rate, keeping calm in the high stress moments of playing golf, and that's when he gets his best shots off. Um, and so that kind of interested me to see if there was any actual footage or any actual interview of him talking about it, because in the article it didn't really speak about, quote, Rory McIlroy himself, but it talks about other breathing instructors and stuff like that. So I wanted to look and see if there is anything like that. And this podcast came up, the Whoop podcast itself, funnily enough. This isn't an advert for Whoop or anything, but I just thought it's interesting to listen to what Rory has to say about his training, specifically towards his breath, so he can perform at his best.
For me, I think we've talked about this before, but like I'm a terrible mouth breather. Like I breathe a lot through my mouth. So when
And this is really interesting, and this is very indicative of most athletes. I've seen studies that very much range, but for the predominantly the most part, 90% of athletes, even at the elite stage, at the elite level, like Rory McIlroy is just saying, are mouth breathers. Then more often than not, you see a lot of mouth breathers at every stage, from grassroots all the way to the elite level. But as Rory's pointing out here, the 10% that do some breath training, like himself, that realize he's mouth breathing, he's in that 90 percentile. Once you implement some breathing, as he's about to discuss right here, you see the changes in your performance.
that is a way that I can get my heart rate to calm down and to feel a little more calm about everything. And
This is interesting, is that the way he's then talking about sitting back in control is the realization that he's a mouth breather and just simply switching it to the nose, to simply switching to nasal breathing. And this switch to nasal breathing is the thing that's having a positive effect before actually getting into the training programs and stuff and breathing and all the rest of it that he's about to talk about. Just that simple switch was enough that he can put him back in control.
it's like when I'm in the final round of a big tournament and like I'm on the back nine, like the one thing I try to do is like even walking between shots is I just try to keep my mouth closed and just breathe through my nose.
Again, Rory's talking about the simplicity here of during the game. Quite often, this is a critique that I hear when I'm coaching people. Mainly, I'm coaching people in the field of football, in the sport of football, is how do I fit it in? As he's saying here, when he's walking on the back nine between shots, he's nasal breathing. He's doing nasal walking, which is helping control that nervous system. This is the same in football. There's breaks in play. There is breaks in play very often in football, and this is where you can implement this nasal breathing between these breaks in play when the ball's gone out of play, and such like. This is what we're talking about. It's not doing some fancy hyperventilating Wim Hof stuff during a game. It's doing these simple things in the breaks in play.
Most important thing in when you're performing for me is just mouth closed. Like I do breathing exercises outside of the golf course, and whether it be after a gym session or before I go to bed or whatever it is. And
I think this bit's very important because he's talking about habitual breathing, the training you do outside of your sport, off the field, off the pitch, off the golf course, in this case, is what's going to affect on the field, on the golf course performance. So implementing breathing strategies in a lower stress environment, and doing more advanced, more in-depth breathing strategies that affect your biochemistry or biomechanics and such like. Doing that off season, doing that pre-season, doing that off when you're not on the golf course or when you're not on the football pitch or whatever your sport may be, that's where you see the effects. You're trying to build those good habits in a low stress environment, so that when the stress happens, you've got tools you can use to manage that stressful environment a lot better.
that then you obviously, if it's 4 in or 6 out, whatever type of breathing that you're doing, I think when you're in a more controlled environment, I think you can start to count the seconds a little bit easier and stuff. But whenever I'm in that state on the golf course and there's pressure and there's everything going on, I think for me, the simple key of just keeping my mouth closed is a good one. Does a lot.
Again, Rory's talking about what we just said, that doing these things off in a lower stress environment, off the golf course, allows you to do them in game as well. Obviously, you're going to build a good CO2 tolerance and stuff like that. You can stress the system a lot better and count those seconds out a lot longer, which is going to be more of a stressor. And you're going to feel those performance gains when you get into a game because your breathing will be so much more optimized. So this is what he's saying, that you don't want extra things to be doing when you're trying to perform at your best. You don't want to be thinking, oh, well, what's the breathing strategy for this? What do I do now? What do I do now? You want to be just using your breath to perform at your best. And the way to do that is to do it off field where there's less pressure. And then when you get into the game, just do the simple things like nasal breathing between shots.
And for people listening to this and wondering what we're talking about, so like 4 in and 6 out would mean you're inhaling for 4 seconds,
Yes.
and then you're exhaling for 6 seconds.
Yeah.
And by having a longer exhale, you're actually putting your body in more of a parasympathetic state, which in turn relaxes you.
Yeah.
This 4 in 6 out thing that you keep talking about is a generalized rule. In general, if you give this exercise to 100 people, it's going to perform well for a lot of them, maybe 60% of people, maybe 60 of those people, but for 40% of those people, I'm just throwing out percentages here, this is a statistical fact, but for what I'm trying to say is that for most people, 4 in 6 out can be adjusted. The best way to do this is to actually do these kinds of exercises and do some actual assessments around HRV linking to your breathing, because that symbiotic relationship actually influences 4 in 6 out, what those seconds actually should be. Should it be 2 and 8? Should it be 5 and 5? That you actually get a better effect if you actually test this through HRV, which is obviously what we do when we're coaching. But that's how you actually find out where the optimized in and out actually is in terms of the inhale and exhale.
Opposite thing would be, inhaling for, a much longer period of time and exhaling short.
Yeah.
And that would put you in like a sympathetic state.
Yeah.
And almost looks like someone's hyperventilating.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So these are different.
So what they're talking about here is one of the master strokes of breathing is that these subconscious systems of the nervous system, that fight or flight, that rest and digest, whether you want to like kind of get the body up and ready to go and get the adrenaline pumping, or cool it down and calm it down in those moments when you need it because you're taking a penalty, because you're taking a shot, you're doing a putt, whatever it may be. Golf's not the sport I know the best, so apologies if my terminology is not quite on it, but you need to be able to do this by controlling a conscious thing that you can control, which is breathing. And this is the link. You can use a conscious system, breathing, to infect an unconscious system or a subconscious system, such as the nervous system. And this is what they're talking about here. The hyperventilating thing is more of a Wim Hof thing. It's not really something that I do as much in my methodology, in my practice. It does have its place within the network of breathing. But in terms of the applying the science to performance, that's not always strictly necessary for the hyperventilation bit, which is, there's other ways to do it that are safer. And you should not be practicing this without a coach and stuff like that, because there can be side effects to this if you're not being coached through these kinds of techniques. So by no way it means am I saying just go out and try these by yourself at home. Make sure you have supervision while you're doing this. Always consult a doctor or a physician before you try these kinds of things.
He's worked with Navy SEALs before that have to, they have to alter their state a lot if they're going in for a mission, or they don't know when they're going to have to be ready to do certain things. I've gained a lot of knowledge through that from him and the work that he's done with the SEALs. He would
something I think is very interesting, because often when we talk about breathing exercises, when we talk about breath work and stuff like that, often it gets termed into or gets shoehorned into that, pigeonholed into that woo-woo science kind of thing. But actually, if you go to the other end of that spectrum and you go more scientific, then you see a lot of people using it in sports and the military to perform at their best. So I actually think quite often it's underrated because of the stigma to it, which I do think is changing. And I think in the next 5 years, more and more people are going to have breathing programs as a staple to perform at their best, because there's so many gains on the table being left by people just aren't training their breathing properly.
Primarily want me to do like 2 sessions a day, like one like after my gym session, maybe one before I go to bed at night. If I get one in a day, it's a good thing. Yeah, that's a win for me. So but every little helps, and again, it's all about just trying to build those really good habits. And since I started to do this 4 or 5 years ago, it's made a huge difference.
Actually, this is one criticism that I do have when I was listening to this, is that I do believe that when it comes into breathing and breathing programs, there is ways to implement it more into your strength and conditioning training, into your regular gym work and such like, so that it bolts onto a current program, so it's not in addition to, because as you're hearing Rory say here, that if he gets one in a day, he thinks he's doing well, but his coach would like him to do 1 or 2. So this is what I think is that breath training, breath programs need to be as bolt on as possible so that it's easier for the athlete to implement this without adding another level of training onto what they're already doing in an already busy schedule. As you also hear him say at the end here, he's been doing it for 4 or 5 years, and he really does believe that it is affected his performance in a very positive way. And the longer you give breathing programs, the more benefit you're going to get because the adaptation is going to happen over that length of time. And that's what you're really looking for is that adaptation over time. But obviously, there are immediate effects as well in terms of just implementing your breathing because if you're poor, you have dysfunctional breathing, moving a inch towards functional is always going to have a net gain in terms of your performance. So it's really interesting to hear him talk about that there. So I think we've covered everything in this kind of short little interview clip. Go search the whole interview if you want to listen to Rory McIlroy talk about a bit more about his training and his gym work and stuff like that, as well as other things to do around golf and performing at his best and winning championships. But just thought it's an interesting clip and gives a bit more depth to the headline I posted recently. But yeah, I just thought it was interesting. So make sure before you go, drop me a like, subscribe. It costs absolutely nothing. It's absolutely free for you guys, but it means the world to me to see that another subscriber come on board to be part of this journey of learning how we can use breathing to perform at our best. And be part of this community of nerds like me that just want to talk about different things that improve performance and talk. I love to talk about the breathing and what I do in terms of coaching. So yeah, thanks for sticking around to the end of the video. And yeah, do all that great stuff for the algorithm, and I will see you on the next one.